Could the decision to keep Amari Stoudemire in Phoenix prevent a premature sunset? And could it hurt the Oklahoma City Thunder? From the Dodge Sports Desk, I'm Mike Sherman, and this is the NBA and OKC with Mike Baldwin. Mike, All-Star Weekend in Phoenix, the conversation was dominated by Amari Stoudemire trade rumors. Now, the Suns have turned around, fired Terry Porter, and really talk like they're going to try to make a run at the playoffs again. Is Amari Stoudemire off the trade market?
I really do think it came down to, do you want to get rid of the coach? Do you want to get rid of Stoudemire? And I think they chose the player. They're changing their style back that fits these guys better. Steve Nash and all those guys, when D'Antoni was there, ran. They said the right things all season long. We're adapting to a new style, but you could tell Nash was frustrated. Even when they came through town, he said, I'm still not getting it. I think in the long run it may be better, but you could tell they were just saying the company line. So it's obvious that they're going to keep Stoudemire and try to return to their old running ways and make a run in the playoffs, because they're only one game out of the 8 seed right now. All they got to do is get on a hot streak the last 30 games and they're in. So it looks like, yeah, he's off the market, which is a little surprising considering what we heard the last week.
Okay, Shaq looked rejuvenated. He keeps thanking the training staff in
Phoenix. You like
Phoenix.
the Jabberwocky dance?
Yeah, the Jabberwocky dance. So, and then Amari stays. They've kind of dismantled the, in 7 seconds or less, Phoenix Suns that we knew. There's Raja Bell is over in Charlotte now. Boris Diaw's there. So they're not the same team, but they look like they want to make a playoff run. The Thunder owns Phoenix's #1 draft pick in 2010. My question to you is, keeping Amari Stoudemire, does that hurt the Thunder's chances of having a high lottery pick out of that pick they own from the Suns?
Well, it would if this team stays intact. But remember, the one thing we're hearing around the league is if you don't make the trade the next 48 hours, these guys are still on the market this summer. So maybe the Suns don't make the playoffs, or they make it as the 8 seed or the 7 seed, get knocked out in 4 games. And the owner, Mr. Starver, has been adamant, I'm cutting payroll. Things are not going well. Remember, Arizona is one of the states to where the economy is hitting the hardest. They've got a high payroll after adding Shaq's $22 million salaries that go through next year. I mean, they could easily switch in the summer and trade Stoudemire again. It's sort of like in baseball when you see a guy, they trade him in this deadline, oh, we'll trade him again next year when they got a year and a half left. Tashara's played for how many different teams now in the last year and a half? This could be a Stoudemire situation. I think the same applies to Vince Carter, Chris Bosh, a lot of these guys. The team said they're going to keep him through the life of the contract for a year and a half. But just because he stays now, if he does, the trade deadline hadn't come and gone, but if he does, I still think they could trade Stoudemire or somebody else this summer. If they keep them all together, there's no guarantee that they're even going to make the playoffs again next year. I mean, Phoenix is a good basketball team, but they're not among the elite. It's going to be an interesting summer in Phoenix, even if Stoudemire stays.
Okay, let's take a break. On the other side, we'll name names and say whether they could be coming or going. From the Dodge Sports Desk, we're back on the NBA and OKC with Mike Baldwin. Mike, let's just throw out some of these names that are being in circulation right now for trade deadline talk. Vince Carter.
He's the one that they claim they would not trade, but he's the one you're hearing the most about here as we get closer to the deadline. I mean, you hear a bunch of different teams, from the Cavs to the Bulls to you name them. I mean, even the Spurs or somebody. Who knows? But, I mean, the Nets right now, they've been trying to shed cap space because they're in the LeBron sweepstakes, they think, in a year and a half. But, I mean, Vince's contract really doesn't affect them because it's going to be gone here in a year and a half anyway. So it's going to be interesting to see what they could get for him and if they actually would shop him, because the rumors all along were, no way, we want to make a run at the playoffs. They're a bubble team over in the East, but you're starting to hear his name, and if he were to move, he would without question be the bigger. I think he's bigger than Stoudemire, even when Stoudemire was traded, and we don't think he will now. I think Vince Carter would be the biggest name just because he's a proven 8-time All-Star.
The Rockets are in on that, a talk of exchange for Ron Artest. The Cleveland Cavaliers or some, but Tim Duncan came out over the All-Star weekend and said, I don't think he fits here. It's hard to teach him to play like we want to play. Now here's a name from the past, from the Big 12 past, Raef LaFrentz.
This is the part of the NBA I'm learning as we go type of thing. He has not played all year, probably is not going to play all year, has a $12.3 million contract, but guess what? It expires at the end of the year, and it's ensured that the team that acquires him here in the next 48 hours, and somebody will acquire him. That is the one slam dunk I think that's out there. He will be traded to somebody. Somebody wants that contract just to shed salary cap space. The question is, do you get a Richard Jefferson off in Milwaukee? Do you get, just run the list of candidates. I think Portland will trade him for something. They're just going to shop him for the best deal. Is it a point guard? Is it another forward to give him depth? Because this is a decent team, but as we've seen with the Thunder, they're not quite playoff savvy ready yet, this young team. They could use another key part, and they've got the best commodity out there, Rafe LaFren's contract to help somebody with the cap. I think he's going somewhere. It's just what can they get for him?
Okay, Rasheed Wallace.
Well, everybody always has said, he's going to go somewhere, and it's who you match up with. And so you hear different rumors out there. I think Sheed will go, and the Pistons are another one of those teams that they're trying to shed some cap space for the future. They've always had an eye on Chris Bosh. And so I don't think he'll be in the mix these next 48 hours. But I'll be interested to see who's running, because I think Rasheed Wallace can still help a team, but it's one of those situations that he's the big contract, get rid of it, help somebody in the playoffs, and Detroit is really fading. So I'm curious to see what the Pistons try to do.
Okay, the Hornets were a team that had talked about Rasheed Wallace too, and Tyson Chandler there. We've talked about Tyson Chandler in another video. Let's talk about the Thunder players. Earl Watson, the guy all year long, people in Oklahoma City have wondered whether he's going to be dealt. What's the latest?
Well, that's the one thing I don't like about the NBA salary cap is I think a lot of teams would really like to have a 20-minute a game off the bench point guard that's going to help you, not just plug the gap while you're a starter like a Chris Paul or somebody sitting down resting. He can actually help you. I mean, some of these wins they've had recently, 2 or 3 times he's helped key runs. The problem is he's due another $6.8 million next year, and the team that inherits him, he's not like Joe Smith and Wilcox, whose contracts end at the end of this season. That's the problem is, yeah, we'd like to have him for the playoffs this year, but we got to take him on again next year when we may not want him. That's the problem with his contract goes beyond this year. And as we're finding around the league, people want contracts that end this year. That's the problem with Earl's. His goes beyond this year.
The trade deadline is 2 p.m. on Thursday, and you can stay with the best coverage team anywhere, every hour at News OK, and every morning in the Oklahoman.